My name is Hannah Brooks. I'm 31 years old. And the strange things about the moment your life quietly begins to come apart is that it rarely sounds like a disaster when it starts. There's no thunder, no shouting, no dramatic moment where everything shatters loud enough for you to recognize it in real time. Sometimes it starts with a sentence delivered so casually, so cleanly, that your brain hesitates, like it needs a second to catch up to what your ears just heard. 3 days ago, I had a man I thought I was going to marry, or at least a man I had already built a future around. His name is Daniel. We've been together for 4 years, living together for 2. Long enough for routines to feel permanent. Long enough to argue about things like where we'd eventually buy a house, even though neither of us had actually picked a city yet. Long enough to share a joint savings account with $45,000 in it and call it our future. I'm a paramedic, full-time 911 system, 24-hour shifts. I've been doing this for 8 years. Started as an EMT at 22, got my paramedic certification at 24, and I've been running calls ever since. Cardiac arrests, car wrecks, overdoses, children who stop breathing in the middle of the night while their parents scream into the phone. The worst days of people's lives. That's where I show up. And I love it. I need that to be clear. Because everything that happened after this only makes sense if you understand that one thing. I love my job. I love the adrenaline. I love the problem solving. I love the 15 seconds where you have to make a decision that determines whether someone gets another year or doesn't. I love my crew. I love the dark humor that keeps us functioning when most people would fall apart. I love being the person who walks into chaos and makes it just a little less terrible. What I don't love is how people react when I tell them what I do. It always goes one of two ways. Either they look at you like you're some kind of hero and say, "Wow, I could never do that," which sounds nice, but gets exhausting. Or there's a pause, a tiny one, a flicker, like you can actually see them adjusting their expectations of you in real time. Like they were expecting something more. Daniel was the second type. He liked me. I know he did. He liked my confidence. He liked that I didn't panic under pressure. He liked the stories. Paramedic stories are gold at dinner parties. People lean in. They listen. But he didn't like telling people what I actually was. I noticed it about 4 months in. We'd be out with his friends and someone would ask what I do. Before I could answer, he'd jump in. "She's in emergency medicine." Technically true, but vague enough to let people fill in the blanks with something more impressive. Something that sounded better on paper. One time at a work event of his, someone asked me directly, "So, are you an ER doctor?" Before I could even open my mouth, Daniel squeezed my hand and said, "She works in pre-hospital care." The guy nodded like that explained anything. Conversation moved on. Later in the car, I said, "You can just tell people I'm a paramedic." Daniel smiled like I was missing the point. "I know, but pre-hospital care just sounds more professional." Paramedic is professional. You know what I mean. I didn't, but I let it go. Because I'm not someone who fights over titles. My patients don't care what's on my business card when I'm the one keeping them alive in the back of a moving ambulance. I figured he'd grow out of it. He didn't. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, he told me his parents had invited us. Big family dinner. His sister and her husband, a cardiologist, would be there. His younger brother, currently in law school. Extended family. The whole performance. This would be the first time I was meeting most of them. I was nervous, but also ready, because meeting the family means something. It means you're real. It means you matter. 2 days before Thanksgiving, I was on shift, standing in the ambulance bay, restocking IV kits. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Hey, quick thing. I told my parents you're a doctor, emergency medicine doctor. Don't correct them at Thanksgiving, okay? It's just easier. Love you." I read it once, then again. Set my phone down. Finished stocking one cabinet, then picked it back up. "You told your parents I'm a doctor?" "Emergency medicine doctor, which is basically what you do anyway." It is fundamentally not what I do. Doctors go to medical school for 8 years. I went to paramedic school for 14 months. Nobody's going to quiz you. Just don't correct them. You want me to lie to your family? It's not lying. It's just not correcting an assumption. An assumption you created. Can you please not make this a thing? There it was. That tone. The one that makes you feel like you're the problem. For noticing the problem. My sister's husband is a cardiologist. My brother's going to be a lawyer. I just want my parents to feel good about us. They should feel good about us because we're good together. Not because of a fake version of me. You're being difficult. I stared at the screen. And for a second, I almost convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. That it was just a social shortcut. That it didn't mean anything deeper. Then a call came in. Chest pain. 68-year-old male. I grabbed my gear. And within 20 minutes, I was in a stranger's living room intubating him while his wife cried 2 feet away. He coded in the ambulance. Flatlined. I brought him back. Delivered him to the ER with a pulse. That's what I do. That's my job. And somewhere between pushing epinephrine and monitoring a failing heart, I realized something. Someone who understands what that means would never ask me to pretend it's something else. I didn't bring it up again before Thanksgiving. Daniel took my silence as agreement. That was his first mistake. Daniel's parents lived in the kind of house that always seemed prepared for company. Neatly trimmed hedges, warm porch lights, a wreath on the front door that looked expensive in a way wreaths should never look. Inside, everything was polished without feeling accidental. The dining room had clearly been waiting all year for a holiday important enough to justify the good china. Linen napkins, candles, a centerpiece that probably came from some upscale home store and had never once been touched by dust. I brought 2 bottles of wine, one red, one white, both decent, not extravagant, but thoughtful, because I know how to show up. I know how to step into other people's spaces and read the emotional temperature in under 10 seconds. It's a skill you develop in my line of work. Walk into a room, know immediately whether someone's dying, panicking, lying, or all three. What I felt the second Daniel's mother opened the door was evaluation. Not cruelty, not judgment exactly. Just the soft, practiced assessment of a woman who had spent years measuring whether the people entering her family were suitable. She hugged Daniel first, then turned to me with a warm smile that didn't quite hide the careful look in her eyes. Hannah, it's so nice to see you again. Thank you for having me. His father shook my hand. Firm grip, direct eye contact. He had the air of a man who had spent most of his life in charge of rooms. His sister Claire was elegant and composed, wearing the kind of quiet confidence that came from marrying well and knowing everyone knew it. Her husband, Andrew, the cardiologist, was polite, reserved, a little stiff around the edges. His younger brother, Michael, looked exhausted in that particular law student way, like caffeine had replaced half his blood supply. Everything at first was fine, smooth, controlled. I almost hated how normal it felt. Because the worst moments in life often arrive dressed as ordinary evenings. We moved through appetizers and greetings and family small talk. I laughed where it made sense to laugh, answered harmless questions, complimented the house, thanked his mother for dinner, played the role of the lovely girlfriend trying to make a good impression. Daniel was relaxed. That was what struck me most. He was relaxed because he thought the dangerous part was over. He thought the lie had already done its job. He thought all I had to do now was sit there and wear it. Dinner started. Turkey carved. Plates passed. Glasses filled. The room settled into that soft Thanksgiving rhythm. Forks clinking against china, overlapping conversations, someone reaching for gravy while someone else asked about traffic, school, work, travel plans. Then, about 20 minutes in, Daniel's mother turned to me with a smile. It was gentle, interested, completely unsuspecting. So, Hannah, she said, tell us about your practice. Are you hospital-based or private? And just like that, there it was, the moment, the sentence, the opening the lie had been building toward all evening. The table didn't go quiet all at once. It was subtler than that. A few voices continued for half a beat. A fork scraped a plate. Someone reached for sweet potatoes. But I felt the shift instantly. Beside me, Daniel went still. Not visibly, maybe. Not to anyone else. But I knew his body well enough to feel tension move through him like a pulled wire. That was the moment I understood something clearly. He was not afraid of me being disrespected. He was afraid of me being accurately seen. I could have played along. That's the truth. I could have smiled. Could have said something vague. Could have let the evening glide forward on a falsehood so polished no one would think to question it. It would have been easy. That's the part people never talk about when they judge honesty. Sometimes lying is easier. Sometimes telling the truth is the heavier thing. And sometimes you know, with painful clarity, that one answer is going to tell you everything you need to know about the person sitting beside you. So I smiled, friendly, calm, and I said, I actually work on an ambulance. I'm a paramedic. I save lives before they ever get to the doctors. The pause that followed wasn't explosive. No one dropped a fork. No one gasped. It was smaller than that, more human. A slight recalibration, a shift in expression, a room adjusting its expectations in real time. Daniel made the faintest sound beside me. Not a word. Just a breath caught wrong. His mother blinked. Oh, she said, I didn't realize. I took a sip of water. That's okay. It's an easy mix-up. I didn't look at Daniel immediately. I wanted to, but I already knew what I'd see. Still, after a beat, I turned my head just enough. He was staring at his plate, jaw tight, color rising in his face. And then something happened that he had clearly never considered possible. His father put down his fork, leaned forward slightly, and looked at me with what felt like genuine curiosity. "A paramedic?" he asked. "Full-time?" "Yes, sir. 24-hour shifts, 911 system. What kind of calls do you run?" And just like that, the room changed. There was no accusation in his voice, no disappointment, no social correction, just real interest. So I answered him, not dramatically, not to impress anyone, just honestly. Cardiac arrests, trauma, overdoses, pediatric respiratory calls, strokes, car wrecks, the usual spectrum of people having the worst day of their lives. His father listened, really listened. Not politely, not the way people pretend to listen while waiting for their turn to speak. The way people listen when something matters to them. He asked smart questions, the kind of questions that told me he actually understood the system. What medications are you carrying these days? How much autonomy do you have in the field? What's your average response volume on a 24? How often are you making treatment decisions before you can even get med control on the line? The conversation deepened fast. I answered everything. Protocols, field decisions, what it means to intubate someone in a dim hallway with a family member screaming nearby. What it means to push meds with incomplete information and no time. What it means to hold a whole scene together in the back of a moving vehicle while your partner drives 80 through traffic and someone's heart is trying to stop in your hands. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't have to. The work speaks for itself. And then, his father said something that changed the entire evening. He leaned back in his chair, looked around the table, and said, "I ran a hospital for 22 years. Do you know who I respected most in the entire chain of care?" No one answered. He looked back at me. The paramedics. The room went completely still this time. Not because he was loud. Because he wasn't. Because he spoke with the kind of certainty that doesn't need volume. "They do what emergency physicians do," he said. "Except they do it in driveways, kitchens, highways, parking lots, and the back of a moving vehicle. No imaging, no labs, no consultants, just training, judgment, and nerve." Then, to my complete shock, he stood up, right there at the Thanksgiving table, reached his hand across the plates and candles and serving dishes, and shook mine, firmly. "That," he said, "is even more heroic than what we were told. Not more heroic than a doctor. More heroic than what we were told." Meaning, he knew. Maybe not from the beginning, maybe not consciously, but he knew enough in that moment to understand there had been a lie in the room, and he chose to correct the record publicly, cleanly, without humiliating me. Daniel's face changed beside me. I don't know how else to describe it, except to say it was every stage of collapse compressed into 3 seconds. Shock, anger, humiliation, panic, a kind of brittle disbelief. Across the table, Claire blinked, then gave a small smile. "My husband says paramedics are one of the most underappreciated parts of the entire healthcare system." Andrew, the cardiologist, nodded. "That's true. A lot of the saves that come in, we're just finishing what you started." Michael looked at me with open admiration. "That's actually incredible." Daniel's mother, to her credit, recovered gracefully. "Well," she said warmly, "we're very glad you're here." And something in me, something I hadn't fully realized had been bracing itself for impact, finally unclenched. Because for the first time in a long time, I was just myself. No euphemisms, no edited language, no polished substitute title designed to sound better in rich rooms. Just Hannah, a paramedic, a woman who worked brutal shifts, came home smelling like antiseptic, and knew exactly who she was. The rest of dinner was unexpectedly wonderful. His father kept asking questions about response times, about the opioid crisis, about burnout, about what I saw most often on the street that hospital administrators missed when they looked only at numbers. His mother asked whether the emotional toll ever stayed with me after shift, and she asked it gently, like she genuinely cared about the answer. Andrew and I ended up talking about STEMI alerts and door-to-balloon times. Claire asked how I learned to stay calm. Michael wanted to know if I'd ever thought about teaching. And Daniel? Daniel barely spoke. He smiled when required, nodded when people looked at him, but I could feel something dark and hot settling under his silence. Not shame for lying, not relief that his family liked me anyway. Resentment, because the truth had not embarrassed me. It had only exposed him. On the drive home, he didn't say anything for the first 15 minutes. Just drove, hands tight on the steering wheel. Streetlights sliding over his face in hard flashes of gold and shadow. I watched the window, waited, and when he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "You humiliated me." I turned slowly in my seat. "I told the truth. I asked you not to correct them. You asked me to lie to your family on the first real holiday we spent together. It wasn't a lie, it was a simplification. No, telling people I'm a doctor when I'm not a doctor is a lie." He exhaled sharply. My dad made a scene. Your dad shook my hand and said my job was heroic. He was trying to embarrass me. No, I said quietly. He was trying to acknowledge me. The fact that it embarrassed you says a lot more about you than it does about him. That hit. I could feel it land. The car went silent again. By the time we got home, the silence between us felt different than it had before Thanksgiving. Before, it had been something I still believed could be repaired. Now it felt like a hallway with a door at the end of it. And once you saw the door, you couldn't unsee it. Inside the apartment, Daniel set his keys down harder than necessary. Took off his coat. Didn't look at me. Then finally said, I need some space tonight. I stared at him for a second. At the profile I had once found comforting. At the man I had loved long enough to imagine forever with. And I realized I didn't feel guilty. Tired, yes. Sad a little, but not guilty. Because I had not broken anything tonight. I had only refused to keep helping him hide what was already cracked. He went into the bedroom and shut the door. Not slammed, just shut. Which somehow felt colder. I stood alone in the living room for a long moment, still wearing the clothes I'd carefully chosen to make a good impression on people who, as it turned out, had never been the problem. Then I picked up a blanket, laid down on the couch, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. Somewhere down the hall, behind a closed door, my boyfriend was angry because his family had respected me too much. And somewhere deeper than anger, beneath the sting and the pride and the humiliation, I think I already knew. Thanksgiving hadn't ruined our relationship. It had revealed it. The fallout didn't explode all at once. It settled, like dust after something breaks. Quiet at first, almost invisible, until you realize it's everywhere. For the first 2 days after Thanksgiving, Daniel barely spoke to me, not in a dramatic storm-out kind of way. Worse, controlled silence, polite distance, short answers that made it clear he wasn't interested in resolving anything, only in letting it harden. I thought maybe he needed time. That maybe, once the embarrassment faded, we could talk like adults. I was wrong. By day 3, the silence shifted into something sharper. You know what your problem is? He said one morning, leaning against the kitchen counter like he was about to deliver a diagnosis. I looked up from my coffee. No, Daniel, what is my problem? You have no ambition. I let that sit for a second. Because sometimes people say things so confidently, you almost think you misheard them. I'm sorry, what? You're fine being a paramedic forever. You don't want more. I stared at him. I love my job. Yeah, he said, like that proved his point. You love it. Great, I love chocolate cake too. That doesn't mean I eat it for every meal. I blinked. That analogy doesn't even make sense. It makes perfect sense. You're settling. Settling? I repeated, my voice quieter now. I save lives, Daniel. And you could be doing it at a higher level. There it was. Not about meaning, not about impact, about hierarchy. You should go to medical school, he continued, or PA school. You're smart enough. You just don't apply yourself. I'm 31, I said. I'm not starting medical school. Then at least change the title. I actually laughed at that. Not because it was funny, because it was so absurd it caught me off guard. Change the title? Something like clinical specialist or field operations director. Something that sounds better. My title is paramedic, I said slowly, like I was explaining something to a child. Because I'm a paramedic. He exhaled like I was being deliberately difficult. I just don't understand why you're so resistant to improving your life. And that was the moment something shifted inside me. Because up until then, I had still been trying to interpret his words generously. Still trying to believe he meant well. But there is a difference between wanting better for someone and wanting them to become someone else entirely. I don't need to improve my life, I said quietly. I need a partner who respects the life I already have. He didn't respond to that. Just shook his head, grabbed his keys, and left. The door clicked shut behind him with a finality that lingered in the air long after the sound itself faded. It didn't stop there. If anything, that conversation seemed to give him permission to escalate, but not directly. Daniel wasn't the type to argue loudly or throw things. He preferred subtlety, control, narrative. It started small. He'd leave his laptop open on the kitchen counter with pages pulled up, PA school admissions requirements, tuition breakdowns, application deadlines. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then I realized the tabs were always positioned perfectly, visible, impossible to ignore. One night, I came home from shift and found a book on my nightstand. From Clinical Work to Leadership, Transitioning Your Career for Maximum Impact. I picked it up, turned it over, walked into the living room where he was scrolling on his phone. I'm not reading this. He didn't even look up. I just thought it might give you ideas. I already have an idea, I said. Keep doing the job I'm good at and love. He sighed, like I was exhausting him, like my refusal to be reshaped was some kind of inconvenience. Then came the quiet rewriting. Not of me, of reality. He started talking to his family, the same people who had been nothing but kind to me, his mother, his sister, and instead of telling them the truth about Thanksgiving, he reframed it, softened his part, sharpened mine. He told his mom that I'd made things awkward by oversharing. Told his sister I was defensive about my job, that I couldn't take a joke. But the thing about truth is, it leaves fingerprints, and people who were in the room can still see them. 3 days after that, I got a text from Claire. We had never texted before, not once in 10 months. Hey, just wanted you to know my parents really liked you. My dad hasn't stopped talking about the ambulance stuff since Thursday. I stared at the message longer than I expected, then replied, that means a lot, thank you. A few seconds later, another message came through. Also, don't let Daniel's insecurity make you feel bad about what you do. I exhaled slowly. There it was. Not dramatic, not confrontational, just clear. Claire saw it, understood it, and wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Then she added, Andrew says you're welcome to visit the cath lab sometime. He'd love to show you what happens after your handoffs. That hit differently. The cardiologist, the one Daniel measured himself against, the one whose title carried weight in every room. He respected me enough to invite me into his world, while Daniel was trying to erase mine. The breaking point didn't come from a fight. It came from a text. Of course it did. It always does. I was on shift. 24 hours. 16 calls by midnight. Pediatric asthma. 2 car accidents. A stroke. A fall from a ladder. The usual chaos. I was exhausted. Sitting in the ambulance bay for a 5-minute breather when my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. I opened it and felt something inside me go completely still. I told my friends you're applying to PA school. They're all really excited for you. Congrats, babe. I read it once, then again, slower, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. He wasn't just ashamed anymore. He wasn't just pressuring. He was building a different version of me and handing it out to people like it was real. I typed back immediately. I'm not applying to PA school. Correct this. The reply came fast. It's not a big deal. Just go with it for now. I'm not going with anything. Tell them the truth. God, you are exhausting. I stared at the screen, at that sentence, and something in me snapped into clarity. Because I had just spent the last 12 hours keeping people alive, making decisions that mattered, carrying weight that most people would never understand. And the person I was supposed to come home to was tired of me not playing along with a lie about my own life. Another call came in. Overdose. Unresponsive. I shoved my phone in my pocket, grabbed the Narcan kit, and ran. We brought him back. Pulse restored. Breathing again. Alive. At 1:47 a.m., I was saving someone's life. And somewhere else in the city, my boyfriend was telling his friends a story about a future that didn't exist. The next morning, when I got home, I didn't go to bed, didn't shower, didn't decompress. I found him in the kitchen. Sit down, I said. Something in my voice must have landed because for once, he didn't argue. He sat. I stayed standing. We need to talk about what's happening. He rubbed his face. You're still on this? Yes, I said. I'm still on the fact that you've lied about my career to your parents, your friends, and now you're actively trying to rewrite my life into something you find more acceptable. I'm not ashamed, he said quickly. I just think you could do better. Better than what? Better financially, better title-wise, better socially. The ways that matter to you. The ways that matter to anyone. I let out a slow breath. Do you actually hear yourself right now? He leaned forward. Do you think I wanted to go to work events and tell people my girlfriend drives an ambulance? I don't drive the ambulance, I said sharply. I'm in the back, keeping people alive. And I should be able to say that without it sounding... He stopped, but he didn't need to finish. I already knew the word. Small, embarrassing, less. Well, I can't, he said finally. I can't, Hannah. My sister married a cardiologist. My brother's going to be a lawyer, and I'm with someone who makes $62,000 a year and comes home smelling like antiseptic. There it was. The truth. Not hidden behind concern. Not dressed up as ambition. Raw. Ugly, honest. And for the first time since this all started, I felt calm. Not hurt, not angry, just certain. I nodded once, then said, I think we should break up. He blinked, like he hadn't expected that. Like, in his version of this story, I was still supposed to fight to stay. You're breaking up with me over a text? I'm breaking up with you because you're ashamed of who I am. I'm not ashamed. You told your parents I was a doctor. That was different. You told your friends I'm applying to PA school. I was trying to... You introduced me as emergency medicine because the word paramedic makes you uncomfortable. That's not... That is exactly what that is, I said, my voice steady now. You don't love me. You love the version of me you think sounds better. Silence. Then, tears. Fast. Sudden. I was trying to help you, he said, voice breaking. And that was the final confirmation. Because that wasn't an apology. That was justification. I don't need help becoming someone else, I said. I need someone who doesn't need me to. I grabbed an overnight bag, walked past him, didn't look back. Somewhere between the front door closing behind me and the cold air hitting my face, I realized something. I hadn't lost anything. I had just stopped pretending I had something I never actually did. Breakups are rarely clean. People like to pretend they are. One conversation, one decision, one door closing. But in reality, they unravel, slowly, in messages that keep coming even after you've said everything that needs to be said. In stories retold to other people in ways that make the ending easier to live with. In the quiet, stubborn hope that maybe the other person will come back and agree to rewrite reality in your favor. Daniel didn't take the breakup well. Not in the way that looks like heartbreak. In the way that looks like strategy. "You're really doing this?" he asked that night, standing in the doorway while I packed a few things into a duffel bag. "Yes." "Over a misunderstanding?" I zipped the bag. "This isn't a misunderstanding." "You're overreacting," he said. "We just have different perspectives on career growth." I looked at him then. Really looked. And for the first time in 10 months, I didn't see a future version of him. I saw exactly who he was. "This isn't about growth," I said. "It's about respect. And you don't respect me." He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I just wanted more for you." "No," I said quietly. "You wanted something different from me." That landed harder than anything else, because it stripped away the last layer of his justification. Bedshoe. I stayed with my friend Maya that first week. She's a firefighter at my station. The kind of person who doesn't ask questions right away, just hands you a blanket, pours you coffee, and lets you talk when you're ready. The first night, I told her everything. From the Thanksgiving lie, to the PA school text, to the way he said, "I can't tell people my girlfriend drives an ambulance," like it was something shameful. Maya laughed at that part, not cruelly, just in disbelief. "Girl," she said, shaking her head, "you pulled a kid out of VTAC last month. You don't need validation from a man who thinks your job needs a rebrand." I smiled for the first time in days, because she was right. Of course she was right. I had just forgotten. The messages from Daniel kept coming, but they weren't apologies. They were revisions. I've been thinking, and I think the issue is just communication styles. Maybe if you explored leadership roles, you'd feel more confident in social settings. I think we both contributed to the misunderstanding. Every message was the same at its core. He wasn't trying to understand me. He was still trying to fix me. I didn't respond. Not once. A week later, he told his parents we had broken up. I found out not from him, but from a phone call. His father. "Hi, Hannah. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." I stepped outside the station, the evening air cool against my skin. "No, sir, it's okay." "I heard you and Daniel ended things." "Yes." A pause. "She told her mother it was because you refused to improve yourself." I closed my eyes briefly. "No, sir, that's not accurate." "Then tell me what is." So I did, plainly. No embellishment. No anger. "She told your family I was a doctor. She told her friends I was applying to PA school. And she's been pressuring me to change careers because she's embarrassed that I'm a paramedic." Silence. Long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Then, she told us you were a doctor." "I know. And she asked you to go along with it." "Yes, sir." "And you didn't." "No." Another pause. And then his voice shifted. Not louder, but heavier. "Good." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Good," he repeated. "Because after you left Thanksgiving dinner, I told my wife that you were the most genuine person either of my children has ever brought home." Something in my chest tightened unexpectedly. "I meant that," he added. I didn't trust myself to speak for a second. Then, softly, "Thank you. I ran a hospital for 22 years, he continued. "I've watched physicians with every credential in the world fall apart under pressure. You handle every single shift. What you do matters." I swallowed. Hard. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." "I'm going to talk to my daughter," he said. "Not because I think it will change anything, but because she needs to hear from someone in this family that what she did was wrong." "I appreciate that," I said, "but it won't change my decision." "I'm not asking you to change it," he replied. "I'm telling you it was the right one." When the call ended, I stood there for a while, phone still in my hand, because in 10 minutes, he had given me something his daughter never did. Clarity. Daniel moved out of my apartment by the end of that week. He left his key on the counter, took his things, left behind almost nothing, except a note. "I hope you find someone who doesn't want better for you." I read it once, then set it down. Because even now, he still didn't understand the difference between wanting better for someone and refusing to accept who they already are. He tried one last move before disappearing completely. Told a mutual friend that I had blindsided him. That maybe there was someone else. I found out when that friend called me directly. She's saying you cheated. I almost laughed. I didn't cheat. I broke up with her because she lied about my career and spent months trying to pressure me into changing it. A pause. That's very specific, because it's true. The rumor died within 2 days. Truth has a way of doing that. It doesn't need embellishment. It just needs space. 2 weeks later, I got a message from Claire. Short. Simple. My parents are really upset with her, not with you. Another message followed. My dad brought you up at dinner again. Called you the paramedic with more integrity than most administrators he's worked with. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because it changed anything, but because it confirmed something I hadn't expected to feel. Sadness. Not for the relationship. For him. Because he had a family that would have accepted me. His father respected me. His sister respected me. Even his brother-in-law treated me as an equal. He had everything he needed, and still chose to chase an image instead. Life didn't dramatically reset after that. It just continued. The apartment felt quieter for a while. Not lonely exactly, just different. His absence left small traces. A missing coffee mug, an empty side of the closet, a silence where there used to be background noise. I found one of his hoodies behind the couch, a hair tie in the bathroom drawer, a container of that expensive yogurt he liked. I threw out the hoodie, kept the hair tie, ate the yogurt. Little rituals of closure. And then I went back to work. Because work doesn't care about your relationship status. It doesn't pause. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It just shows up and expects you to do the same. My first shift back, we ran a call for a 19-year-old who had wrapped his car around a utility pole. Entrapped. Bleeding heavily. Fire had to cut the door open. I climbed into the wreckage with him. Started an IV. Managed his airway. Kept talking to him while they worked. He kept asking, "Am I going to die?" And I kept answering, "Not tonight, not on my shift." 22 minutes later, we got him out. Alive. He walked out of the hospital 11 days later. That's what I do. Not a doctor. Not a clinical specialist. Not a rebranded version of something designed to sound better in a room full of people who measure worth by titles. A paramedic, 31 years old, making $62,000 a year, wearing a uniform that smells like antiseptic and adrenaline, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. My crew noticed something was off. They didn't ask. They never do. First responders don't pry. They adjust. My partner started bringing me coffee without saying anything. The captain scheduled me for a training day instead of the street when he saw I was running on empty. Maya showed up on her days off just to sit in my living room and talk about nothing. That's my family. The one Daniel never understood. I'm not dating right now. Not because I'm broken. Not because I'm afraid. Because I'm recalibrating. The next person who sits next to me at a table, when someone asks what I do, I need them to say, "She's a paramedic," with the same pride they'd say anything else. Not because the jobs are equal, but because the respect is. I ran into his father a few weeks ago, at a hardware store, of all places. He was buying mulch. I was grabbing supplies for the station. We talked for 10 minutes, about work, about a cardiac arrest I'd worked the week before. He listened the same way he had at Thanksgiving, fully, present, interested. When we parted, he shook my hand again. Same grip, same steady eye contact. "You're still the most impressive young woman my daughter ever brought home," he said. "That won't change." I sat in my truck for a minute after that, not crying, just letting it settle. Because sometimes, the people who see you most clearly aren't the ones you fall in love with. They're the ones standing just outside that story, telling you the truth you needed to hear all along. At 2:14 a.m. that night, the tones dropped. Chest pain. 61-year-old female. I was out the door in 90 seconds, because that's the job. And I love it, exactly as it is.